It was supposed to be a quiet evening. The sky blushed with the orange hues of sunset as 16-year-old Luke Harper walked down the gravel road behind his grandfather's old ranch. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was only out to stretch his legs and maybe check on the old corral. But fate had other plans. A sudden, unnatural glow rose in the distance, flickering violently. Smoke. Thick. Black. Rising far too fast. Luke stopped cold. His heart skipped. "Grandpa," he yelled, sprinting back toward the house. "Something's burning." His grandfather, Ethan, a retired firefighter, rushed out. Within seconds, they were both driving toward the source in Luke's pickup. It didn't take long to see it. The North Field barn was engulfed. The wind, cruel and fast, pushed the flames farther, swallowing the dry wooden structure like kindling. "That barn's been abandoned for years," Ethan said, eyes squinting through the smoke. "There shouldn't be anything in there." But Luke wasn't convinced. He heard something, faint, desperate. A shrill neigh. "No. Wait," Luke whispered. "There's a horse in there." Without waiting for a response, Luke leapt from the truck. "Luke," Ethan shouted. "Get back here, it's not safe." But Luke was already running. Every instinct told him to stop. Every muscle screamed to turn back. But that sound, it wasn't just any cry. It was filled with terror. He reached the side of the burning barn, heat blasting his face like an open oven. Through the smog, behind a warped, half-melted gate, stood a horse. Wild-eyed. Trapped. Smoke had blackened its coat and seared the edge of its mane. But it was still alive, barely. The moment their eyes met, time stopped. The horse didn't thrash. Didn't scream again. It just stared at him. A long, silent plea. That look burned deeper than any fire ever could. Luke grabbed a rusted metal bar and wedged it under the gate latch, forcing it open. A piece of timber crashed nearby, sparking flame inches from his boots. He didn't flinch. "Come on, girl," he said, reaching his hand out slowly. "You gotta trust me. I'm getting you out." The horse stepped forward, trembling, then recoiled as the fire roared overhead. Luke felt it too. The fear, the heat, the pull of death all around. Behind him, Ethan appeared through the smoke with a wet blanket. "Cover her eyes. It'll keep her calm," he shouted. Luke caught the blanket, tossed it over the mare's head, and grabbed the reins still loosely hanging from a hook. "Easy now. Just follow me. We're going home." Step by step, they moved. Every foot felt like a mile through the haze. Sparks rained down like angry stars. Wood splintered and moaned around them. The barn's roof groaned. Then the worst happened. The front support beam collapsed. Flames surged. "Luke!" Ethan's scream was the last thing he heard before everything turned red. But in that chaos, something unbelievable happened. The horse surged forward. Not away from Luke, but toward him. With a force he didn't expect, she nudged his shoulder, breaking his trance. He stumbled back to his feet, breath ragged, and together, boy and horse, they sprinted through the last wall of fire. They broke through the smoke. Alive. Collapsing in the dirt, coughing, shaking, both soaked in sweat and ash, Luke clung to the horse's neck. She was still breathing. So was he. But this was only the beginning. Because once the fire cleared, they discovered something that changed everything. End of section 1. The sun had long dipped below the horizon by the time the fire was finally out. Firefighters arrived too late to save the barn, but thankfully, no lives were lost, at least none human. Luke sat on a blanket near the barn's smoldering remains, wrapped in his grandfather's old jacket. The mare lay beside him, chest still rising and falling, her nostrils flaring with every breath of smoke-tainted air. "She's still with us," Ethan said, gently checking the horse's legs. "Burns on the flank, maybe a cracked hoof, but she's tough. She'll make it." Luke nodded slowly, his eyes locked on the horse's soot-covered face. "She didn't run, Grandpa. She looked right at me, like she knew I'd come." Ethan patted Luke's shoulder. "Sometimes animals know more than we think." They decided to call her Ember. The next few days were filled with long nights and early mornings. Luke tended to Ember like she was part of the family, cleaning wounds, changing bandages, feeding her slowly, gently. The local vet stopped by daily, impressed by the horse's will to live. But recovery wasn't easy. Ember wouldn't stand. She trembled constantly, and her eyes, those bright, knowing eyes, were now filled with pain. One morning, as rain tapped gently on the tin roof of the stable, Luke brought in her feed. She didn't move, not even when he called her name. His heart sank. "Come on, girl," he whispered, kneeling by her head. Don't give up on me now. Still no response. Just shallow breaths. Ethan entered quietly, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. You might have to accept it, son. Sometimes, even the strongest fall. But Luke refused to believe that. He returned that night with his old acoustic guitar, sat down beside her, and began to play. A soft, clumsy melody. Just a tune his mom used to hum when he was sick. To his shock, Ember's ear twitched. He kept playing. That's right. He smiled through misty eyes. Still in there, huh? By morning, Ember had lifted her head. 2 days later, she tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. And finally she stood. Wobbly. Weak. But standing. Word spread around town about the boy who ran into fire to save a horse. Local news stations showed up. Luke didn't care for the cameras. He only wanted Ember to heal. But something shifted in the town. Donations poured in. Someone brought in fresh hay. A carpenter fixed the old corral fence. Kids from school started stopping by with treats. Even the local farrier, Mr. Keller, who hadn't spoken to Luke's family in years, showed up to fit Ember with new shoes. This mare's got fight, he said, admiring her stance. Deserves a second chance. Through it all, Luke and Ember grew closer. She followed him everywhere, like a shadow. Slept near his window. Whinnied softly when he left. But one afternoon, a stranger came to the ranch. Clean boots. Pressed slacks. He drove a luxury car with tinted windows and a license plate from a different state. Name's Randall Hayes, he said, flashing a business card. I believe you rescued something that belongs to me. Luke blinked. Excuse me. I'm here for the horse, Randall continued. She escaped from my breeding facility last month. Rare bloodline. Very valuable. Ethan stepped forward. That horse nearly died in a fire. She's not fit for transport. Randall's smile didn't fade. I've got vet papers, ownership records, and a trailer outside. I appreciate the rescue, but she's mine. Luke stood frozen. Ember, sensing tension, pressed her head into his side. I'm not letting her go, Luke said finally, voice low but firm. Randall laughed lightly. Kid, you don't have a say. But Luke did. Because what Randall didn't know, what no one had expected, was that Luke had already taken the first step to make Ember legally his. He turned to Ethan. Can we show him the footage? Ethan nodded. They brought Randall into the house, sat him down, and played the security footage from the barn camera. It showed Ember locked inside. No tag, no brand, and no signs she belonged to anyone. It also showed Luke, running into fire to save her. Randall sat back, jaw tightening. This isn't over, he muttered, storming out. But it was. Because that night, something else happened. Something that made Ember more than just a rescued animal. Luke woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Ember was standing outside, staring at the old trail beyond the ranch. Ears perked, muscles tense. Something was calling her, and she wanted Luke to follow. End of section 2. Luke didn't know why Ember stood like that, staring into the night. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was something deeper, almost spiritual. He stepped outside, barefoot on the cold porch. What is it, girl? Ember gave a low, rumbling whinny and looked back at him, then again toward the trail. It was the old forest road, overgrown and unused, a path he hadn't taken since he was a kid. Still in his sleep clothes, Luke pulled on a jacket and grabbed a flashlight. All right then, he whispered. Let's go. Ethan stood at the window, watching silently. He didn't stop him. Luke and Ember moved through the trees slowly, branches snapping underfoot, moonlight slipping through the canopy. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. Then they found it. A small clearing. An old, rusted fence barely standing. Inside, a collapsed wooden shelter and an overturned feed bucket. Luke froze. This was the old ranger post. Decades ago, his mother had worked here rehabilitating injured animals. Luke had vague memories of coming here as a toddler, helping feed rabbits and clean water troughs. A sign lay buried in weeds. Harper Wildlife Haven. Ember walked into the clearing, calm, almost reverent. She sniffed the dirt and nudged the broken fence. Suddenly, it all made sense. Luke dropped to his knees. She led me here, he breathed. Not just to a place, to a purpose. In the days that followed, Luke couldn't shake the feeling. That trail, that shelter, the way Ember had guided him. It was as if the fire wasn't just a tragedy. It was a beginning. He began clearing the old haven, fixing the fence, cleaning out debris. and Ember was with him every step. They worked side by side like they were building something sacred. Ethan soon joined in, hammer in hand, eyes a little brighter. Then the town pitched in too. Volunteers brought supplies, tools, even helped install a new water pump. The local paper ran a story. Boy and burned horse rebuild forgotten sanctuary. It caught fire online. Soon, donations started rolling in from across the country. Messages poured in from strangers, some who had lost animals, others who had once dreamed of healing them. One woman from Colorado wrote, "Your story brought me back from the edge. I'm starting again because of you." And Ember, now healthy, strong, and spirited, became a symbol, not just of survival, but of second chances. Randall never returned. He couldn't prove ownership. And truth be told, no one believed Ember belonged anywhere but with Luke. 1 year later, they held a grand opening. The Ember Haven Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. Luke, now 17, stood beside his horse at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Reporters, families, and even state officials gathered to celebrate. He didn't say much. Just one thing. "I didn't save her. She saved me." The crowd clapped, many with tears in their eyes. Ember nuzzled his hand, then trotted toward a young foal who had just arrived. The rescue's first new guest. She greeted it with a soft whinny, calming its nerves. She knew the feeling. That night, Luke sat on the hill above the ranch, looking out over the newly built stables, fields, and warm barn lights. Ethan joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done good, son. Your mom would have been proud." Luke smiled, eyes full of quiet gratitude. "It all started with a look," he said softly. "In the fire, she looked into my eyes, and I ran in." The wind carried Ember's whinny through the hills. Steady, strong, eternal. A symbol. A legend. A beginning. / the end.